Hello and welcome to Aliens Revealed Live. I'm your host, Dean Caparella, here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Alien abductions, monster-infested ranches, men in black, near-death experiences, close encounter experiences and more. We speak to some of the most amazing people on the planet, ready and willing to share their chilling stories with you. And they all come from the Aliens Revealed Live files here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Well, alien abduction research has revealed some startling numbers in recent years. In fact, what many might consider to be rare, it seems that the complete opposite is the truth. Kathleen Marden is a leading UFO researcher. Her interest in UFOs and contact began back in 1961 when her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had an abduction experience. It happened in New Hampshire's White Mountains area, and their case has gone into UFO folklore as one of the most famous cases of all time. During Aliens Revealed Live's online summit, Kathy Marden revealed a startling statistic from her alien abduction research. It will stagger most people. Marden is the director of the Mutual UFO Network's Experiencer and Research Team, and when asked how prevalent alien abduction was, she said that an average of over 100 people want to speak with her team each month, which is quite remarkable. An alien abduction event used to be greeted with plenty of skepticism. Mostly, it was an event for the media to exploit, to sell more newspapers or to get more bums on seats for television ratings. And they would bank on the shock factor to sell it. The reality is that the number of people experiencing some type of abduction or contact event is a little more than the odd case people hear in the news. This is following extensive alien abduction research. Overall numbers quoted to Aliens Revealed Live spanning several decades may total into the 7 figures mark. And that's staggering. And why isn't this top of the agenda for the media? If that shocks you, then consider why you have never heard of these large abduction numbers. In fact, part of the reason we've just given you is part of that overall reason. The media's callous attempt at adding shock factor to these types of stories is enough to make any experiencer cringe. They balk at coming forward to tell their story. Kathy Marden says being ridiculed is not something anybody will handle too well. And she says her team offers experiencers a safe and caring environment to relate their stories without the fear of ridicule. And it then becomes a whole different ballgame. There are consequences to having abduction experiences for many people, whether it's good or bad. It's been discovered during alien abduction research that even if people have a benevolent experience, it's usually followed by post-traumatic stress disorder. Marden says the reason former alien abduction numbers have been low is the fear contact experiences have in telling their story. Ridicule is a powerful deterrent, and there seems to be some aspect of the public hell-bent on discrediting abductees. If you're listening to this and have kept your experience quiet for fear of ridicule, then now might be the time to join a safe and caring environment. You don't need to go public. Kathleen Marden says by contacting her team at MUFON, you'll be invited to have a confidential telephone or Skype conversation. Kathleen Marden's joining us now. Hi, Kathleen.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Good to have you with us.
Thanks.
Kathleen, you've authored several books. Your latest is Extraterrestrial Contact, what to do when you've been abducted. What prompted you to write your latest book?
Being the director of the Mutual UFO Network's Experiencer Research Team, I became aware of the fact that we have an average of 100 individuals every month who want to speak to a member of our team who is a caring, compassionate, non-judgmental listener who can give support and information on where these individuals can go to seek professional help or to join a support group for experiencers. So it is just the sheer number of individuals out there who are seeking understanding, some kind of support, some information that will help them to investigate their own experiences. For example, how to make it end if they wish to end this, what to do if they want to go public with their story, what they can expect. So the book is a comprehensive guide to help experiencers come to terms with what is occurring in their lives, to determine whether or not it is ET or something else, and it just goes on and on from there.
Why do you think contact is so traumatizing for people?
Well, I have discovered that regardless of whether or not contact is highly positive or highly negative, it is traumatic. It causes post-traumatic stress disorder in many individuals. And it appears that part of the reason is that they know something has happened to them. They cannot remember all of what occurred, and they have probably read negative information in the media, because that tends to be what the media focuses upon. I guess fear sells. So they anticipate that those memories are going to be highly negative, that they were going to be treated very poorly, regardless of what happened.
Do you think that's the main reason why people will often just keep it to themselves and not come forward about their situation?
I think that the main reason that people keep it to themselves is because they might have attempted to tell a close relative, and that person laughed at them, asked them what they'd been drinking or what they'd been smoking before they had that happen. There has been the fear of ridicule ingrained into our American society over a period of the past 60 to 70 years. And so the general public has an image of individuals who've had these experiences as being the toothless residents in a rundown trailer park somewhere, or individuals who have psychiatric disorders. Nothing can be further from the truth. This is happening to people around the world, in all societies, in all religions, in all levels of education, in all socioeconomic groupings. And certainly people who are very mentally healthy. I've received reports from military officers, from medical doctors, from psychiatrists and psychologists, from engineers, other scientists. It runs the gamut.
Because you mentioned a figure when we started the interview that was it 100 people a month?
Yes.
That is staggering.
Yes, it is. It's a very large number.
Because I guess most people would have the impression when we talk about alien abduction that it's it's a minor thing. It doesn't happen a lot, but I guess the fact that we don't hear of the fact that people don't come forward and relate their experiences is the reason why maybe it seems that the numbers are low.
Yes, I agree with you there. There has been a history of public ridicule by disinformants who invent a scenario and propose that scenario as an alternative to what really happened to that individual. And some of them have gone as far as launching ad hominem attacks on individuals who have had this happen. Oftentimes they wanted to have this information remain confidential, but it just was thrust into the public's attention by a media after sometimes there was, such as in my aunt and uncle's case, there was a violation of confidentiality that took the story to the public. In Travis Walton's case, he had actually gone missing for 5 days before he was dropped off by this craft and then reappeared. And so there were individuals who attempted to destroy their reputations, their character, to cause them to lose their jobs. There's a long history of this kind of negative treatment, and I hope that it's getting better now. I believe that it is.
So what do you think someone who has gone through an experience maybe more than once and has kept it to themselves should do?
Well, certainly our statistical data indicates that they have gone through these experiences over a lifetime. Only 25% believe that they have had one or two contacts. The vast majority believe that it's many more than that. So what should they do? Well, first of all, I believe that they should talk to an individual who is going to be a caring, compassionate, non-judgmental listener. Someone who has a great deal of knowledge and information. In other words, a specialist in this field. Now, I don't recommend hypnosis immediately. I think that we have to determine the level of trauma that this individual is experiencing. And if they have post-traumatic stress disorder, I personally recommend EMDR therapy with a psychotherapist who, and this is the eye movement therapy that works extremely well when a person has post-traumatic stress disorder. And, the insurance pays for it because it's a licensed therapist. And it's a very good way to begin to recover some of those memories as well. So, that's an important step to take. You could also go to a psychotherapist who uses hypnosis in their treatment. But I would definitely not recommend a certified hypnotist or hypnotherapist as a beginning step if there is trauma involved.
Also, people who would love to talk to someone about it but have been loath to do it, it's not that they have to go public with it, is it? If you mentioned they find a safe environment, maybe just tell someone who, so they can just get it off their chest and take some pressure off themselves.
Absolutely, and that is why I set up MUFON's experience research team the way I did. We are the support arm of MUFON. So we have about 30 specialists that individuals can go to confidentially. Their information is not going to be given to the public. Their names are not going to be released. They can go to MUFON.com, scroll down to the Experiencer Research Team, click on the link to the Experiencer Research Team's page. At the top of the page is the Experiencer Questionnaire. That will take you to 30 very simple yes and no, true and false questions. Complete those questions. It does not matter what your score is. It means absolutely nothing. So just complete it. Dr. George Medich, who is my assistant director on the team and who runs the team on a day-to-day basis because I'm extremely busy in doing the work I do, but he runs the team. He makes the assignment to the qualified, caring, compassionate specialist on my team. That person will write to you to set up an appointment, and then you can have a confidential telephone conversation or Skype conversation.
Kathleen, I've heard the term modern contact used quite a number of times, even in your book. Is there a difference between contact today and contact, say, 20 years ago?
There absolutely is, and I would go back more than 20 years, actually. I'd go back 30 to 40 years maybe, when we first became aware that thousands of, if not millions of people are being taken. The old type of contact was occurring when people were outside. They were either driving or fishing, hiking, camping, participating in some kind of activity when they were outside their home. They had a close encounter with a craft. They usually saw non-human entities on the craft or near the craft, and then they were taken to the craft. And so oftentimes there was a great deal of evidence. There might have been witnesses, there might have been radar evidence, might have been clothing that could be analyzed and that sort of thing. The difference today is those initial people who were taken years and years ago were the beginning of all of this. If they had the characteristics that these non-human entities were looking for, they then took this person throughout their lifetime, and they then took their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, so on and so forth, from the time that they were tiny youngsters. According to our research, the majority of experiencers were taken when they were less than 20 years old, and about 37% when they were less than 5, as far as they remember.
Mm-hmm. You're probably in a better position than most to make an assumption. And when you say that a person gets taken time and time again because the aliens want something, what is it do you think that they want?
It's not just one thing that the aliens want. They're looking for several different things, and different groups are running different kinds of programs. The program that most interests me, because it has happened to the vast majority, involves entities, non-human entities, who are kind of a light gray to blue-gray color. They have large eyes, sometimes dark if they're wearing lens covers, or sometimes without the lens covers. They are telepathic. They have a very vestigial kind of nose, just a slit for a mouth, no external ears, larger upper bodies, very thin limbs, and they appear to work in a couple of groups. There are the more intelligent, probably sentient beings, who are the scientists, the communicators, the physicians, etc., on the craft. And then there is a smaller group. The taller group is about 5 to 5.5 feet tall. The smaller group is about maybe 4 feet tall, maybe a little shorter, maybe a little taller. That smaller group could possibly be biorobotic. We're not positive about this. We only know that they stand against the wall and they only move when they're instructed to do so, unless they see someone attempting to abscond with something that belongs on that craft. And then they retrieve whatever it is that individual has. They're the assistants who dress and undress people and take them to the examining room. We know that something happens in that examining room. Everyone who has this kind of experience is placed on a table. And they receive what appears to be an implant. Dr. Roger Lear used to remove these implants, and they were studied in scientific laboratories. They have highly unusual properties. They are attached to the proprioceptor nerves in people's bodies. Our bodies don't reject them. They appear to have intelligence. They can travel from one part of the body to another where they are supposed to end up. Dr. Lear's researchers discovered that they are made from a crystalline structure of rare earths, and meteoric material, and there was one that would transmit radio signals into deep space. So very highly unusual properties with the implants. We know that there is also a reproductive program going on, and there is a lot of speculation among us researchers about exactly what that is. There are many, many individuals who have reported either having ova removed or a sperm sample removed. There are individuals, many, who have reported observing fetuses in various stages of development in what appear to be cylindrical tanks on craft in these artificial gestational tanks. Women report that they were inseminated artificially on board these craft. They go back, they believe that they are pregnant, and then suddenly they are not pregnant. There's been a great deal of effort to attempt to get scientific evidence that this is actually happening. We know that there are cases where women have been pregnant and suddenly they were not pregnant, and they did not have the symptoms of a miscarriage. So we are still not in possession of enough scientific evidence to be able to determine that this is happening, although certainly in individuals' reports, it has happened time and time again. The fetus is removed, then put into these tanks and raised until they are old enough to survive outside these tanks. We also believe that they are tampering with our human DNA. Time and time again, experiencers have been told, and this dates back into the 1950s, that these non-human entities fear that our technological development is out of sync with our spiritual development, that they are concerned that we're going to cause an environmental collapse on this planet, or that we might engage in a nuclear holocaust. Very, very concerned about this too, and they are attempting to upgrade the human genome to move us ahead on an evolutionary scale so that we won't destroy ourselves. They take people generationally, time and time again, in order to test this, the progress they're making, and also to test the level of toxicity in the human body as a result of the environmental toxins that we have. These are, I've been told these time and time again by individuals and in the studies that we have done. So those are some of the things that we know they are doing. And some groups are more benevolent than other groups. Some have different agendas than other groups as well.
Okay, so you just answered one of my questions, and of course, I was going to ask, does it seem like they're trying to build a better us? But the other question is that experiencers have often reported that when they're on the ships, there appear to be different species of aliens collaborating together. Is this what it is, a collaboration among different species of aliens? And then on top of that, is there a human collaboration involved as well?
That's a very good question. I have received, my team and I have received thousands of reports, and individually I have received at least 2,000. And what we discover is that sometimes the Greys are working with a human type of being. Sometimes the human types appear to be working alone. Sometimes the human types are working with an insectoid type, and sometimes the Greys are working with an insectoid type, kind of a mantis type as well. So we know, and I have photographs actually of these entities taken by experiencers that lead me to believe that yes, indeed, this is occurring. There are other types that appear not to be working with the groups that I just spoke about, and those are the negative reptilian types. The question about whether humans, and you're probably referring to the military, are involved in this as well. In the reports that we received, about 20% believe that they have had these MyLab experiences where some section of the military was involved in what was occurring with them. When we asked, can you identify the military uniform? Some said Air Force, some said Navy, others really couldn't identify the uniform. It was the way they moved, their actions that led them to believe that it was military involvement. Some researchers have hypothesized that these are actually human-appearing non-humans who are working on this project. There are other humans who have had this occur, such as Melinda Leslie, who are absolutely certain that this was the military.
Okay.
So,
Kathleen, the terms used for people who experience these things, is there a difference between terms such as abductee, contactee, and experiencer? If there is, what is it? Do they all mean the same thing?
well, what I can tell you is that abductees and contactees are all experiencers. The abductee group was identified in the most recent study that the Mutual UFO Network did on 516 experiencers, and that is after we eliminated those that we identified as hoaxers. We had some built-in questions and ways to identify those who wanted to throw off our results. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Don C. Donderi, a retired psychology professor from McGill University and statistician who spent his lifetime doing social research, participated in this MUFON project as well, and I did as well. And what we were able to do is to use a psychological measure to identify those individuals who had UFO abduction syndrome. This was a test that was developed over a number of years that Dr. Donderi standardized. And so he administered this, and we identified those with UFO abduction syndrome. It doesn't mean that they had horrible experiences. It means that they had certain knowledge and characteristics. On the other side, when we think historically about contactees, and we still do have contactees, those involve the individuals who are having very friendly contact. They might be doing CE5 experiments to call in these non-human entities. The entities might enter into their environment as the result of a request. They might be channeling this. They might be communicating via telepathy in a deep meditative state. There are many ways to fall into the contactee category, but we think of that as being something good. We know that back in the early 1950s, those contactees who were communicating, they said, with benevolent space brothers, were called contactees. And many researchers today have been trying to call everyone a contactee. I object to that. I believe that a person who has been abducted has the right to call themselves an abductee. And also, a contactee is certainly not an abductee. So this is why I think it's extremely important that if we're going to use a generic term, we need to use the term that Dr. John Mack, the brilliant psychiatrist from Harvard University, who spent the later years of his life researching this phenomenon, he used the term experiencer. And I think that it's a very good term.
Okay. You mentioned the terms benevolent and malevolent aliens.
Yes.
So does that put people, in danger when they come across a malevolent alien? I mean, what's the objective of the bad aliens? And if there is one, is there also friction between the bad and the good aliens? I mean, do they go to war over this without us knowing?
Well, I think we have to define good and bad aliens because some are more benevolent than others. We know that from our studies that most individuals have come into contact with sort of business-like non-human entities. They have a job to do, they do that job, and sometimes they might be kind to the individual. Sometimes the person is very frightened. And I think that we have to understand that human emotions color the outcome of our experience. So if we're extremely frightened and we can't remember what happened, but we think that it had to have been something horrifying, then we're going to think of those non-humans as being malevolent. There is one group that most individuals consider to be malevolent, and those are a kind of alligator looking draconian reptilian who shapeshift. Now that gives us a clue. Shape-shifting. They might be in the category of what we think of is highly negative astral entities, not extraterrestrials, but these entities who live in a different vibrational state, maybe at a lower level than we humans, but who can transcend the dimensions and come into the human environment from time to time to attempt to attach to vulnerable humans, to feed off this fear, feed off this negativity, and grow. So I did devote a chapter in Extraterrestrial Contact, what to do when you've been abducted, to this phenomenon, with a lot of information about what it is, how it can happen, and how you can stop it.
That's a fascinating subject too. I'd love to get back with you at some stage and just do an entire segment on that. Another question I had, do people often get contact with aliens confused, say, with paranormal phenomena?
Yes, absolutely. There is a paranormal overlay. So we have to assist individuals in collecting their evidence, having it all documented so that they can determine, and we can help them, exactly what is occurring in their lives. Because as I said before, there are malevolent interdimensionals. There are also highly positive interdimensionals. We think of as angels who will come and assist people who are in a very bad way. So, but there is also an overlap of the kind of paranormal phenomena that happens in people's homes. Among the people who experience contact, who have taken part in our study, these 516, 60% have stated that they had the feeling that something unseen was walking on their bed. It had weight, but it did not have substance. They couldn't feel it when they'd reach out for it, but they could sense the weight of it. Also, a very high percentage all had seen these lighted orbs that seemed to have intelligence that came into their homes and interacted with them. Sometimes they expanded into the full bodies of these gray entities. So, again, lots of questions, but we at least have some scientific evidence that this is occurring. There are other things occurring at a lower rate, such as poltergeist activity. We know that happens time and time again in paranormal experiences. Light orbs happen in paranormal experiences, too, in people's homes. So you have to separate that out. Who is inside that orb? What consciousness is in there? And also, I mentioned poltergeist, things flying off shelves, doors opening and closing. That's at a much lower rate among the people who believe they're having extraterrestrial encounters. But it is quite common in paranormal experience homes.
All right, we've got a few minutes left, Kathleen. I just wanted to ask you, the fact that we mentioned earlier, you're the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, probably the most famous abduction case in history, I guess, along with Travis Walton's case. That happened back in 1961. Now, if that didn't occur, would your life have been different?
My life would have been very, very different. I started out in psychiatric social work, and it was all because of my interest in this phenomenon. And then I ended up doing graduate work in education and working in that field for a number of years. But 30 years ago, I decided to leave that field. I'd become ill. That was one of the reasons. But I had met all of the original researchers in Betty's and Barney's case. I knew the vast amount of physical and circumstantial evidence. I spent 15 years doing an extensive investigation of my aunt and uncle's experience. And because I wanted all of the answers, I wanted to study all of the possibilities of possibly prosaic explanations for this. In the end, I could come to only one conclusion, and that is that it was a real event. And certainly, if I had never had that happen in my own family, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as if your path has been chosen for you.
Yes, in a sense.
Well, with so much evidence today in all stages of alien contact, I guess 1 through to the ones we know, 5, and so many witnesses, why do you think the skeptics are still refusing to give it any credibility?
Well, the skeptics are probably reading the disinformation that has been disseminated by government disinformants and believes that because even though many of these people were not real scientists, they claim to have a scientific point of view on this. What they have actually done is they have built a false scenario with false information to cover over the actual evidence, information, and story. This has happened in the Hill case, and this is part of the reason why I try to set the record straight and show the evidence, especially when I speak at conferences, what exactly happened to the Hills and what is the evidence for that. But there are so many people who don't really know the true story, don't know what the evidence was because of the disinformation.
And a lot of the times the arguments that they bring forward, they provide no basis for. There's no evidence on their part.
Yes, absolutely true. It's all speculation.
In your research, as we wind up, is there one experience, a case that you've been involved with that stands out amongst all the others?
Does that include the Hill case? In my mind,
I guess the Hill case aside, and obviously the Travis Walton, which has been well documented, but the ones that you've researched.
Well, I did a pretty thorough journalistic investigation of the Tom Reed and Matthew Reed abduction case that started in central Massachusetts when they were boys. Their mother had been taken from the Allagash in Maine when she was 16 years old. And it is generational contact. I know Tom. I've interviewed him many, many times. I did not do the investigation of the actual physical evidence, but the Mutual UFO Network did. Tom Reed took a lie detector test and passed it with no evidence of attempting to fool the polygraph examiner. He passed it with flying colors. It's a very compelling case, and it's one that the Mutual UFO Network has endorsed and I have endorsed. Another one is the case of Ed and Denise Stoner. And I have personally investigated that case over many years. I've done the hypnosis with Denise and with Ed. I have examined physical evidence in this case, and these contacts have repeated time and time again. So we were able to acquire physical evidence along the way. So to me, that's a very compelling case that Denise and I wrote about in the Alien Abduction Files, one of my 5 books as well. And gosh, there are many compelling cases, I must say. I wrote about 2 of those in Extraterrestrial Contact that I think that readers will be very, very interested in. One happened at an airport in the Southwest, and one happened in Winnipeg, and both very compelling evidence cases.
Okay. Well, we spoke recently with Denise, and we spoke about the Alien Abduction Files, but your latest book is Extraterrestrial Contact. What do you do? What to do when you've been abducted? Been a fascinating discussion. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. There's much more to talk about. Keep fighting the good fight, and thanks once again for joining us.
Okay, thank you so much. Nice talking with you.
That's leading researcher and director of Mutual UFO Network's Experience and Research Team, Kathleen Marden. So why is West Virginia such a UFO hotspot? UFO sightings in West Virginia and paranormal occurrences seem to go hand in hand. I'm not sure it's a reputation the mountain state is trying to establish, but the monster legend is well and truly established there. One of the country's most scenic states, West Virginia's rich UFO history is a goldmine for ufologists. Paranormal investigator Dave Spinks has made it his business to keep UFO audiences informed about the latest news and findings from West Virginia.
West Virginia, me being from here and knowing the type of people that live in this area, they're not just going to come out and say they saw something that they didn't truly believe was not of this world. Because, number one, it's kind of links into the Bible Belt, so to speak. And to them, to a lot of the people that report these things, they liken them to possibly something of a religious manner, possibly being demonic or stuff. So they don't like to talk about it. And some people feel if they talk about it, it brings more attention to that subject, and therefore it'll bring more bad omens to them. But when they tell you that they saw this and they experienced this, you better really pay attention, because they're going out on a limb, so to speak, Mm-hmm. So with West Virginia in general, in the 1960s, West Virginia was considered one of the UFO capitals of the world due to the sheer number of sightings that were going on here in the Mountain State. And I found a lot of newspaper articles to back all that up in my research over the years. It was day after day after day. There was people from all around the state. In particular, you had in 1952, you had the Flatwoods Monster incident. Well, a lot of people only think that was a one-day event. It was actually over a couple of week event. If you sit down and take a hard look at it, because similar descriptions of the creature were being seen in numerous places of the state. It happened the first night, and right down the road about 20 miles. The second night, a young couple had seen and described a similar type creature, and there was no way they could have had any indication of what happened in Flatwoods the night before. And then near Parkersburg and Wheeling, a similar type creature was described a few days later. So you had that event go on. Then you had Blue Book come in and investigate it, right? And then a short time later, lo and behold, there was a government-funded project in Green Bank, West Virginia, that deals with the Green Bank Observatory, and a young man named Frank Drake was put on that project. And a short time later, him and Carl Sagan founded SETI right here in West Virginia. A lot of people don't know that. It did happen. And, you know, they were searching for ET right after the Flatwoods Monster incident right here in West Virginia. So, and everyone knows the Drake equation, the famous Drake equation. So, you know, then a short time later, you had the whole Woody Derenberger incident where he had this bizarre encounter with a UFO and a character called Indrid Cold. He wrote a book about it, Visitors from Lanulos, and claimed to have actually flown on a spaceship with this Indrid Cold to this planet, and had numerous years of encounters with this creature, and to include his family members. I actually interviewed his daughter. She confirmed everything about what he was talking about and told me about her interactions with Indrid Cold's kids herself. So it's a fascinating thing. And then in the 60s, right after the Woody Derenberger incident, you had the whole wave of the Mothman sightings and hundreds upon hundreds of UFO sightings in and around the Point Pleasant area throughout the 60s. And it was so intense with UFO sightings, people would go out on a nightly basis after supper, pull their cars off the side of the road near the bunker area, and watch strange craft and lights in the sky. And there's hundreds of newspaper articles that back all this up.
Spinks had an encounter with a monster in West Virginia as a young man, and it left an impression on him. The Mountain State native has been researching and investigating sightings and encounters of strange creatures for more than 30 years. He says the sheer volume is incredible, with famous UFO incidents resulting in legends such as the Flatwoods Monster. That's coming up next week on Aliens Revealed Live Files. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget to check out our site at arlhub.com. That's arlhub.com. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.